They thought it was funny. A harmless quip, they called it. A playful jab at an old woman on her 60th wedding anniversary. But words, my dears, are rarely just words. They are arrows, blunt or sharp, meant to find their mark. And on that day, surrounded by the laughter of a family I had nurtured for 6 decades, their arrow found mine. Deep. And true. You won't be here next year, my eldest grandson, Michael, chuckled, clinking his champagne glass against my husband Arthur's. So we'll just have to celebrate extra hard now, won't we, Grandma? His sister, Sarah, giggled, adjusting her expensive scarf. Oh, Michael, don't be morbid. She'll probably haunt us from the afterlife, looking for her lost dentures. The room erupted in laughter. My own grandchildren. My blood. My legacy. They believed it was a joke. I believed it was a declaration. A prophecy they intended to fulfill. Before I tell you how a lifetime of love and sacrifice led to that moment of shattering disrespect, and what this old woman did in response, drop a comment below. Have you ever been dismissed or belittled by those you loved most? Hit subscribe if you understand that sometimes, the quietest people hide the loudest storms. My story, like many, begins with love. Arthur and I built our lives from nothing. 60 years. Think about that number. 60 years of shared dreams, scraped knees, late-night talks, and the quiet satisfaction of watching a family tree grow. We poured our youth, our energy, every penny, into them. Our children, then their children. Arthur, a diligent carpenter, built houses. I, a seamstress, mended and created. We taught them the value of hard work, of family. Our children, Evelyn and Thomas, grew up seeing frugality, resilience. They saw us deny ourselves luxuries so they could have opportunities we never did. College funds. First cars. Wedding expenses. We were the bedrock. The silent, sturdy foundation. For years, that's what we were. Taken for granted, perhaps, but with a quiet acceptance. Our children, now successful in their own right, gradually began to see us less as parents to consult, and more as resources. Grandparents to trot out for holidays. A convenient place for Sunday dinner. And a rather large, aging bank account. The shift was subtle at first. A loan that never quite got repaid. A casual expectation that we'd babysit, regardless of our plans. Then, the entitlement began to bloom. My son Thomas, with his booming construction business, would scoff at Arthur's old-fashioned methods. My daughter Evelyn, a high-powered lawyer, would advise us on our finances, which usually meant encouraging investments that primarily benefited her connections. And the grandchildren? Michael, the eldest, with his tech startup that was always on the cusp of something big, always needed a temporary bridge loan. Sarah, the fashion influencer, saw our antique furniture as clutter and our old photos as quaint. We loved them fiercely. But that love, it seemed, was increasingly viewed as a weakness to be exploited. 60 years of marriage isn't just a number, it's a tapestry woven with joy and sorrow, but also with quiet observations. We saw the subtle manipulations. The whispered asides. The way they'd strategically forget our opinions. We were like an old oak tree in their garden, always there, providing shade, but increasingly unseen. Unappreciated. I remember distinctly Arthur's 75th birthday. We had hoped for a quiet family dinner. Instead, Thomas turned it into a networking event for his business partners. Arthur, sitting at the head of the table, was a prop. I watched his face. The quiet resignation. That was the first crack in the porcelain, though I didn't recognize it then. And then there was the discussion about our house. Our home. The one Arthur built with his own hands, brick by brick. A casual dinner conversation, about a year ago, where Michael suggested, "Grandma, Grandpa, have you thought about downsizing? This place is so much upkeep. You could sell it, live off the proceeds, and then you'd really be comfortable." Comfortable? Our comfort, it seemed, was intrinsically linked to their future inheritance. They spoke of it as if it were inevitable. A right. Not something we had spent a lifetime building. Arthur, bless his heart, simply said, "This is our home, Michael." But I saw the glint in Michael's eye. The calculation. The unspoken thought, not for long. We were always generous. Too generous, perhaps. We lived by the philosophy of family. But somewhere along the line, their definition of family became a one-way street. It became about their needs, their wants, their future. And our needs? Our dignity? They became secondary. Then tertiary. Then, seemingly, non-existent. Our 60th anniversary. 60 years. An achievement. A milestone. We chose a small, elegant restaurant, thinking it would be intimate. Our children, their spouses, our grandchildren. 25 of us. A grand affair, by their standards. For us, it was simply a culmination of a lifetime. The evening began politely enough. Toasts were made. Kind words exchanged, though some felt a little rote. Then came the gifts. More for show, I felt, than genuine sentiment. Expensive gadgets for Arthur that he'd never use. A designer handbag for me that felt too heavy, too loud. The alcohol flowed. The laughter grew louder. And the filters, they began to drop. I watched Michael, emboldened by the champagne, stand up. To Grandma and Grandpa, he boomed, raising his glass. 60 years. An incredible feat. And that's when the joke landed. Michael, looking directly at me, his eyes bright with a dismissive amusement, said, "You won't be here next year." Sarah, ever the echo, added her lost dentures comment. The room, filled with a generation that had never known hardship, roared with laughter. My own children, Evelyn and Thomas, chuckled along. A nervous, embarrassed chuckle from Thomas, a dismissive, "Oh, those kids" chuckle from Evelyn. No one corrected them. No one. I felt Arthur's hand tighten on mine under the table. His knuckles were white. He was hurt. Deeply. But in that moment, something shifted within me. The pain was still there, a sharp, twisting knot. But beneath it, a cold, clear stream of resolve began to flow. The oak tree, long providing, was about to snap. I looked at Michael, at Sarah. At Evelyn and Thomas. They saw an old woman, perhaps a little frail, a little deaf, a little irrelevant. They saw an easy mark. They saw an inheritance on the horizon. What they didn't see was 60 years of quiet observation. 60 years of understanding human nature. 60 years of patience. And they certainly didn't see the storm brewing. That night, the laughter of the anniversary party still echoed in our ears. Arthur, normally resilient, was quiet. "They don't know," he mumbled, his voice thick with pain. "They just don't know." But I knew. They knew exactly what they were doing. And that night, I made a silent oath. No more. My revenge, I decided, wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be dramatic. It would be methodical. Precise. The kind of revenge only an old woman, with nothing left to lose and a lifetime of secrets to uncover, could orchestrate. Our family had always been good at keeping secrets. Especially the ones involving money. My son Thomas's construction business, so booming, had always been a little too reliant on unsecured loans from us. My daughter Evelyn's law firm, so successful, had conveniently overlooked a few loopholes in our trust arrangements. And the grandchildren? Their lavish lifestyles were funded by a generosity they deemed endless. My first step was research. Not just family records, but publicly available information. Old building permits. Business licenses. Court documents, carefully filed away. My memory, they thought, was fading. But the details, the dates, the numbers, they were all perfectly preserved in the filing cabinets of my mind. And in dusty boxes in the attic. I reached out. Not to family, but to the forgotten. Arthur's old carpentry apprentices, now successful builders in their own right. My former seamstress clients, now influential figures in their communities. People who remembered the Arthur and Eleanor that built something from nothing. People who owed us no favors, but felt a quiet respect. Or perhaps a shared distaste for entitled youth. My plan wasn't about monetary gain for us. We had enough. It was about exposing truth. About consequences. About teaching a lesson that only a "you won't be here next year" type of joke could truly warrant. They wanted our inheritance? They would get a legacy of truth. The beauty of being underestimated is that no one sees you coming. While my grandchildren were busy planning their next lavish vacation on what they considered future inheritance, I was busy making sure that future looked very, very different. Thomas's business. He'd always cut corners. Unlicensed subcontractors. Shady land deals. All meticulously documented in old ledgers I'd kept hidden away, out of misguided loyalty. Loyalty, it turned out, was a currency they understood only when it benefited them. I began sending anonymous tips. To building inspectors. To local news agencies known for investigative journalism. Not explosive revelations, but subtle nudges. Perhaps you should look into X project, a few irregularities. Evelyn. My high-powered lawyer daughter. Her pride lay in her reputation. Her firm prided itself on its ethical practices. But her advice on our trust, subtly shifting assets to her own children's names, rather than ours, was a clear conflict of interest. A breach of fiduciary duty. I consulted with an old, trusted, discreet lawyer. Not to sue Evelyn, but to strategically expose the legal vulnerabilities of her actions. A few strategically worded letters to the Bar Association. An anonymous complaint to a senior partner at her firm, detailing the advice she'd given to her senile parents. And the grandchildren. Michael and Sarah. Their lives, broadcast across social media. Their ostentatious spending. Their casual disregard for others. They were their own worst enemies. I found an old collection of Michael's college emails. Not just embarrassing, but detailing shady practices in his early tech startup days, long before it became legit. And Sarah's influencer career? I found the anonymous forums where she had paid for fake followers, bought fake reviews, and engaged in unethical product endorsements. My tools? An old laptop and a surprising knack for internet research. And, crucially, the patience of a saint who had finally run out of patience. The dominoes began to fall, one by one. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, persistent whisper. A building permit audit here. A discreet internal investigation at a law firm there. An anonymous tip to a brand about an influencer's fraudulent numbers. They were too busy laughing at their jokes to notice the ground crumbling beneath their feet. We sent out invitations for a gathering. Not an anniversary, but a family meeting. Arthur, looking stronger than he had in years, watched me with a glint in his eye. He knew. He had been quietly helping, finding old documents, remembering dates. He was the quiet strength, the steadfast wall. They arrived, our children and grandchildren, looking agitated. Thomas was agitated about a surprise tax audit. Evelyn was fuming about an anonymous complaint that had reached her firm's senior partners. Michael's startup was under sudden scrutiny from investors. Sarah's brand deals were mysteriously drying up. They were bewildered. They blamed bad luck, unfair competition. They looked to us, as always, for comfort. For solutions. For money. And that's when I spoke. My voice, frail with age, but imbued with the steel of 60 years of observation. You know, I began, my voice clear in the suddenly silent room. At our anniversary, Michael made a joke. He said, "You won't be here next year." And Sarah added, I continued, my gaze fixed on them, that I'd probably haunt you from the afterlife, looking for my lost dentures. A slow, knowing smile touched my lips. Well, my dears, I'm still here. And I haven't lost a single denture. I laid out the evidence. The anonymous tips. The legal vulnerabilities. The documented frauds. Not with anger, but with a quiet, undeniable authority. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I simply presented facts. The facts of their deceit. The facts of their entitlement. And the facts of their downfall. Their faces were a symphony of shock. Michael's arrogance crumbled. Sarah's composure shattered. Thomas's bluster vanished, replaced by a pale fear. Evelyn, the lawyer, looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in years. Her eyes filled with a dawning comprehension, and then, a chilling realization. Our home, I said, my voice softening, but firm. The one you so casually planned to sell. It's now being donated to a foundation for vulnerable elders. The proceeds from its sale will ensure that no other elderly person is ever subjected to the kind of neglect and disrespect we endured. The silence in the room was deafening. No more laughter. No more jokes. Just the echo of their arrogance, shattered by the quiet strength of an old woman. Arthur passed away peacefully a few months after that family meeting. He left this world with a quiet smile, knowing our dignity had been restored. The children and grandchildren? Their lives are different now. They are still recovering from the consequences of their own choices. They still try to call. They still try to explain. But the trust, once shattered, is not so easily mended. Revenge, for an elder, isn't about cruelty. It's about reclamation. Reclamation of dignity. Of respect. Of a lifetime of sacrifice. It's about teaching a lesson that sticks. A lesson about the value of those who paved the way. A lesson about the quiet strength that lives in the hearts of those you underestimate. So, no, my dears. I wasn't gone next year. I was simply preparing. Preparing for the day the joke would turn on them. And I can tell you, with the peace that only true justice brings, it was worth every single moment. Because sometimes, when love is shattered, the quiet strength that rises from the wreckage is the most powerful force of all.